ISIS has claimed responsibility for the worst terror attack on Russian soil in decades, and its worst attack on European soil in history. And they've said that they're targeting Russia because Russia has played a historical role in targeting Muslims and oppressing Muslims around the world. And they link it very directly to Vladimir Putin's foreign policy. You could begin the history during the Soviet Union, when the Soviet forces invaded Afghanistan and supported a government that it had propped up against Mujahideen and Islamist factions. But more often, it's taken back to the two wars in Chechnya in the 1990s and then in the 2000s, when foreign fighters from all over the Islamic world came to the country and began to fight against Russian forces. That continues into the mid-2010s, when the Putin government supported Bashar al-Assad in his fight in Syria against many different factions, including both pro-democracy forces and also Islamist groups as well. And that includes groups like ISIS. So there's been a drumbeat of news that Russia was cracking down on ISIS cells inside the country, and also that Russia could face a major terrorist attack. The US released intelligence early in March, warning its citizens not to attend concert halls because ISIS might plan a terrorist attack there. So we know that the Russians had this information. The question is why they couldn't stop the attack. One key theory is that Russia is so distracted by the war in Ukraine and has sent so many of its interior troops and other people who should be focusing on maybe things like the Islamist threat are now focusing on Ukraine, dissent, and other issues as well, that security forces were simply too distracted to be able to stop this attack.
Putin said that the Moscow attack was conducted by radical Islamists, but reasserted his earlier claims that Ukraine could have been involved.
Это злодеяние может быть лишь звеном в целой серии попыток тех, кто с 2014 года воюет с нашей страной руками неонацистского киевского режима.
There's no sign that Ukraine was involved in any way, but the real question is what Russia is going to do next. We have seen Russia continue a campaign of rocket attacks against Ukrainian cities and Ukrainian infrastructure, but that was already occurring before the attack took place. The question is whether there could be another type of escalation. That's going to depend very heavily from the decisions taken by Vladimir Putin and from the people who surround him. This attack has had an extraordinary effect on Russian society. I think all Russians are really shaken by the levels of violence that took place at the Crocus City Hall. And it's probably shaken the country even more than anything that's happened in the last several years involving the war in Ukraine and other factors. For many people, this kind of terrorist attack is something that they can't remember since the mid-2000s in the Moscow theater siege at Nordost or in Beslan. And it might convince many of them that the kind of safety, personal safety, that they had come to rely on under the Putin government might be a thing of the past.